I want to be able to see you. And I'm so happy to be here. Every time that I'm asked to speak, I'm so appreciative and so honored that you come to listen to what I've learned in my studies to get ready for the talk. And when I found out that today's, the month's topic was going to be freedom, I thought, what do I want to talk about? What does it mean to me? And immediately I thought about a bird in a cage. And there's a reason why he's so small. Because when I was thinking about a bird in a cage, not having any freedom, immediately it brought to mind my favorite fairy tale, which is The Nightingale by Hans Christian Andersen. So I started doing a little research about the story, and I found out that he went to Tivoli Gardens. Of course, you know Hans Christian Andersen was from Copenhagen. And he visited Tivoli Gardens, which is an amusement park and venue, has many venues there. And they were having an Asian display. So he went and saw it. And when I found that out, I thought, well, no wonder he was so stereotypical in his story, where he has the whole emperor's palace made from porcelain and little tiny bells tied to all the flowers along the pathway, so that as people walk past, there's tinkling noises. And then he has a gentleman in waiting in the story that waits on the emperor, and the only thing he says is, "Pit." So I thought, okay, well, I don't think that's how things really are in China, but no wonder if he went to see it at a show. So he went back again to the second time to Tivoli Gardens, and then he sat down and wrote the story of the Nightingale in only 2 days, which is pretty amazing. And there's more to the story, that he was in love with the Swedish opera singer Jenny Lind. He had a very, very deep love for her. Unfortunately, it was unrequited. She was in love with someone else. And she wrote to him and told him she loved him like a brother, which just about broke his heart. But anyway, so he wrote the story of the Nightingale, and Jenny Lind is purportedly the Nightingale. So, in the story, somebody moved. In the story, Andersen writes about many, many people going to visit China. And they went home back to their countries, and they did not write about the Great Wall, the palace made out of porcelain, the Yangtze River. Any of the things, what they wrote about was the most magnificent of all the magnificent things they saw was the Nightingale. And eventually, the emperor of China reads one of the books. And he calls his gentleman in waiting in, and he says, "What is this? I've never even heard of a nightingale. What does it sound like? What does it look like?" And the gentleman in waiting says, "Don't know." So he just runs off, and he goes running all over the palace trying to find someone who knows what the nightingale is, or where it is, and how they can find it. Well, it turns out that in all the people he talked to, the only person who knew, had ever heard of the Nightingale, was a lowly little kitchen maid. And she was allowed to take broken meat scraps to her poor sick mother down through the woods down by the water. So she says, yes, she will lead everyone to the Nightingale. So the gentleman in waiting gets all this huge retinue together, and they go off to go find the Nightingale. Well, they travel along, and pretty soon they hear cows lowing. Oh, they say, "Oh, how wonderful is that sound? It's magnificent." And she says, "Oh, silly, that's just cows lowing. You haven't heard anything yet." They travel a little further along, and they start hearing frogs croaking. Oh, wonderful, wondrous, magnificent, it's lovely. What a nightingale. No, she says, you're so silly. That's a frog croaking. So eventually she gets them through the woods and down close to the water, just as dusk is falling, and they hear it. The trilling evening call of the nightingale. It is so beautiful that they all just fall to the ground, weeping. They cannot believe the sound. Amazingly, the nightingale speaks. And when they command the nightingale, to appear in front of the emperor to sing, readily agrees. So back they all go, back through the woods, back past the frogs, back past the cows, and they arrive. The whole stage is set. The palace is lit up. Everyone is ready. And the nightingale sings upon command. So beautifully that even the emperor is moved to tears. Well, from then on, the nightingale is put into an ornate cage. No freedom anymore. And made to perform on command, which she does beautifully for days and days and months. Children are born. They're named Nightingale. Women go around with water in their throats, trying to warble like the nightingale. People pass each other on the street. One says, "Night," and the other says, "Gale." But the nightingale lives trapped and is walked once a day by 12 footmen, each holding a ribbon tied to her foot. Because of her kindness and desire to put others' needs above her own, the nightingale gave up her freedom to fly through the woods, sing in her natural surroundings, and live the natural cycle of life. Have we ever felt that we were trapped in a cage, longing to be free from some circumstance in our life or condition, or maybe even a relationship? I have. Maybe we've sometimes felt that if only we could be free to choose again, we'd choose differently. Maybe we'd change jobs, change cities, change houses. I think I could be happy if I moved to a different house. I want it bigger. But I'm finding in my spiritual growth that it isn't what's all around us. We have to change ourselves, not the where, the how, or the why. The Daily Word from October 12th, 1971 says, "The most freeing idea we can lay hold of is that nothing in the outer can bind us, neither circumstance, condition, nor any other person. Our freedom is a freedom of spirit, whatever we may have previously believed. When we realize that we are essentially a spiritual being, we open freedom's door. It isn't up to anyone else to free us. The key to open the door to freedom is changing ourselves." When I read that, I went, wow. And there it is. All right, back to our story. One day, the Emperor of Japan sends a box to the Emperor of China, and when he opens it, he finds inside a bejeweled, wind-up replica of the nightingale. Everyone soon prefers this new bird because with the real nightingale, there were so many beautiful different melodies, they couldn't learn any of them. Now they had a replica. And so the same song was played over and over and over again until everyone was able to go around the palace singing the song of the nightingale. So they loved the new nightingale. Look how pretty it is compared to a plain little brown bird. The real nightingale is soon forgotten. She flies away unnoticed and unmissed, goes back home to her beloved woods and her freedom. Last January, I set out on a slow quest for spiritual growth by focusing first on self, then on my loved ones, and this time others. True freedom is always about how we live among others, how we love one another, how we act peacefully with self-control toward one another. An important truth is that we have freedom from sin, not freedom to sin. Those of us sitting here today, I think you've all learned that truth. But when we look at the world around outside, there are so many that take the freedom to sin. Martin Luther said, "Freedom is not the right to do what you want, but rather the power to do as you ought." The truly free person is the one who has the desire and the ability to look into the future and judge the alternatives and choose those things that will make him truly happy in 10,000 years. So freedom doesn't mean doing what we dream of doing or acting on our every wild or crazy idea for momentary euphoria. It's choosing through our inner selves, our inner guidance, what will bring us the greatest happiness today and the deepest joy in eternity. We can either use our freedoms as an excuse to sin, or we can use our freedoms as a means to serve others. I taught math, so I put them as equations for you to make it very easy. If you have freedom and love, you'll be working to serve other people, like the nightingale. If you take away the love from freedom, you have a sinful nature. A good example of this is when I was in Joliet, Illinois. My former husband was in the Navy, and he was there in training. So the first thing I did was look for a church, and we had no money, nothing. I mean, they brought us Christmas gifts. They were a really wonderful church. We needed tires for our car. They bought tires so that we could get the rest of the way to California after his training. So I saw both of those. I saw the freedom and the love from the people in the congregation. One day, one of the men in the congregation picked me up to take me to go get the car once the tires were on it. And he wanted to have an affair with me. And I looked at him and I went, "Excuse me? I know that's a sin." And he goes, "Oh, we just have to ask forgiveness afterwards." Well, I'm sorry, but I did tell his pastor because I thought he needed to know that this man needed a little bit of extra prayer and guidance and instruction in how a Christian really should act. And I was happy when I saw the last of Joliet, actually, at that point. But anyway, freedom minus love, as I've discovered firsthand, causes men to hate, commit murder, steal, lie, show bitterness, anger, and verbally and physically abuse others. It leads to bullying, pushing others around and determining one's own way. If we truly loved others, those kinds of acts would be impossible. So my lesson from that time in Joliet is that everyone in your life is either a blessing or a lesson. And I got a really good lesson that day. I told him no. I hope you know that. Yeah. Oh gosh, freedom plus love means going beyond ourselves to take care of others and their needs, and sometimes maybe even reaching beyond ourselves. Well, when the emperor discovers that the nightingale has flown the coop, he becomes so infuriated with the ingratitude of that little bird that he banishes her, which is the worst punishment other than execution that you can possibly have in that kind of a empire. He turns to the mechanical bird for solace, but one day it will no longer play. A spring has sprung, and it's inoperable. The royal watchmaker is called in. He manages to repair it, but he says, "You can only play this once a year." So 5 years pass. The emperor becomes deathly ill. The royal doctors shake their heads over the prognosis. So the servants lay down cloths in all the hallways so that their slippered feet make no noise whatsoever to disturb the dying emperor. All the courtiers leave the palace, expecting to return to a dead emperor in the morning. The emperor is lying, pale and sweating, in his bed below the open window. It's supposed to get darker, not lighter. Death comes slithering in through the open window and sits on the chest of the emperor, holding on to his sword, wearing his crown, and grasping his imperial banner. The emperor hears the voices of all his good and bad deeds clamoring around his head. "Music," he cries. But everyone has left him. There's no one to play the Chinese drums or wind up the mechanical bird. And then, suddenly, the sweetest music in the world fills the room. The little nightingale has heard of the illness of the emperor and come back to see her friend. She sings so utterly beautifully that even death is moved. "Play some more." "Oh, I will," she says, "if you give me back the crown." "Done." So she sings and gets back the emperor's crown. "Play more." "Oh, I will, if you give back his sword." "You can have it." So she continues singing. "Play more." "Oh, I will, if you give back the imperial banner." "I shall." And as she sings and sings and sings, he eventually longs for his own garden, and whoosh, he's gone, taking all the deeds with him. The emperor opens his eyes and sees the tiny little bird and says, "I know you. You were the one who came and sang so beautifully for me that I cried. I've treated you very badly. You've saved my life. I want to reward you handsomely, and I'm going to smash that mechanical bird to pieces." "Oh no," she said, "don't do that. It did the best it could for you. And as for me, I don't need any reward. I've been rewarded enough, for I have brought tears to the eyes of my emperor. And that is the greatest reward for any singer. I shall stay here and sing for you for as long as you need me to. Close your eyes and sleep now, for I love your heart more than your crown." And I shall come every once in a while and visit you and tell you of everything going on in your kingdom so that you can be a better emperor. But on one condition, you must not tell them who it is that is helping you. The story ends, quite surprisingly, with the courtiers coming in the next morning, and the last of it is the emperor sits up in bed, smiles at them and says, "Hi, good morning." Now, I'm no literary scholar, but it seems pretty obvious to me that if Miss Lind is the nightingale, then Hans Christian Andersen is the emperor. And I think that the mechanical bird, if this were written in another time, could have been her phonographs that he would have to listen to. But Thomas Edison hadn't invented the phonograph yet, so that doesn't quite work as an analogy. But I do think he used death to show his depth of feeling for Miss Lind. That at one point he would die of a broken heart because she didn't love him back. Because he said, in The True Story of My Life, published in 1847, "Through her I learned that one must forget oneself in the service of the Supreme. No books, no men have had a more ennobling influence on me than Jenny Lind." She must have been quite a woman to have that great an impact on Hans Christian Andersen. And she actually lived the life of a nightingale, because the man that she loved with all her heart was the composer Frédéric Chopin. And he contracted tuberculosis. He wrote that when she sang for him, he felt better. She didn't, however, cure him with her music because he did die later on, and she was never able to marry him. But she wrote to Hans Christian Andersen in 1971, "I would have been happy to die for this my first and last, deepest, purest love." You may be asking yourself why I'm telling you the story of a fairy tale today. Well, because I agree with Lars Bo Jensen, who said in his case notes, "It is a pity to regard The Nightingale as simply the story of Andersen's passion for the singer Jenny Lind, when it is equally important to focus on what the tale says about art, love, nature, being, life, and death, and on the uniquely beautiful and highly original way in which these issues are treated." We have the personification of love, freedom plus love, in The Nightingale. And then we actually have a person being a true nightingale in Jenny Lind. Because not only did she care for Chopin and care for many others, she gave a concert in London and donated all the proceeds to build a tuberculosis hospital in London. P.T. Barnum of Barnum and Bailey brought her over to the United States, and she toured and did 93 concerts for him, and then continued on her own, giving concerts, and used all of the proceeds from her concerts to build free schools in Sweden. The little brown nightingale opened the door to freedom, but with her freedom to show love to the emperor, she saved him from death and showed him the freedom to be more loving to his subjects. This act changed the emperor's heart, and a changed heart leads to changed relationships. When we change ourselves and find the key to open freedom's door, we change hearts and relationships. Here are some of the dozen ways to love one another found in the Bible. I chose those that I thought the Nightingale really exemplify. So I've done enough talking for now. I want you to turn to somebody else, and you're going to read those to each other. And then I'm going to ask you to choose one that you can act on this week. You don't have to, you can talk about it to the others, or you can just decide for yourselves. So turn to somebody, and I want to hear them.
Build up one another.
Forgive one another.
Encourage one another. Comfort one another. Teach one another. Encourage one another.
Give preference to one another. I think that means putting them before yourself.
I like comfort. Which one do you like? Yeah. The First Thessalonians 4. Yeah.
Be kind to
I do too. One.
Well, good. I'm all right. I'd love to see that. That would be wonderful.
just can't get past it.
I love what I'm hearing. It's wonderful. Jody, you could have got up and moved to somebody. Oh, you were? Okay, good. When we experience true spirit-guided freedom, we want to share it with others. The Nightingale shared her sense of freedom with the Emperor. Jenny Lind shared her freedoms with many, many children and other people suffering. The Daily Word from March 12th, 1959 tells us that we should share our freedoms first with those closest to us, those for whom we feel a measure of responsibility. We help to give them freedom. I need to work on this part. By freeing them from all tendency on, I'm going to say my part, to hold them to my own personal beliefs. When the Nightingale told the Emperor, "I love your heart more than your crown," she was helping him claim his freedom by recognizing his true self. As I find the key to change myself and open freedom's door, God's loving, powerful Spirit will move through me as spiritual freedom that blesses me and enables me to bless others. I am free to go the extra mile in helping others, not because I have to, but because I'm changing myself, opening freedom's door, and benefiting others in my life. As the great Nelson Mandela said, "For to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains," the same as opening freedom's door, I'd say, "but to live in a way that enhances and respects the freedom of others." We need to spread that out into our world today. Remember that Martin Luther said that this freedom is the opportunity, ability, and the desire to do those things for others that will give you the deepest happiness now and the greatest joy 10,000 years from now. So open freedom's door. Let your hearts, your minds, and your souls search throughout the land for others like the Emperor whom you can move to tears with your kindnesses. We're going to release the Nightingale. Because living a truly free life, uncaged, unfettered, unbound, will produce fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness, kindness, generosity, and self-control. So open your doors and fly free, little nightingales. Yay!
Yeah. The lights.